The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the small front porch of 1247 Maple Street in Leavenworth, Kansas, where Sarah Beth Caldwell sat in an old wooden rocking chair that had belonged to her grandmother. In her left hand, she held a certified letter from First National Bank with the words "Final Notice of Foreclosure" printed in bold red letters across the top. In her right hand, she cradled the triangular folded American flag that had been handed to her 6 months ago at Arlington National Cemetery, along with the words, "On behalf of a grateful nation." The irony wasn't lost on her. A grateful nation that was about to take away the only home her 8-year-old daughter, Emma Grace, had ever known. Emma Grace played innocently in the front yard. Her blonde pigtails bounced as she pushed her toy soldiers around in the dirt, creating elaborate battle scenarios that she had learned from her father's bedtime story. She had no idea that in 48 hours they would have nowhere to live. Staff Sergeant Michael Caldwell had died serving his country in Afghanistan, and now his family was losing everything, while he lay buried beneath a white marble headstone in Section 6. Sarah stared at the foreclosure notice through tear-blurred eyes, reading the same impossible numbers over and over again. Behind on mortgage payments due to delayed benefit process, late fees accumulating daily, final payment demanded within 48 hours, or face immediate eviction. The sound of a car slowing down made her look up from the paperwork. A black SUV had pulled to the curb, and a tall man in a Kansas City Chiefs hoodie was stepping out. Sarah quickly wiped her eyes and tried to compose herself as the stranger approached her front gate. Travis Kelce paused at the white picket fence, his eyes immediately drawn to the folded flag in Sarah's hand. He had been driving through town after visiting a local charity event, taking the scenic route back to Kansas City, when something about the scene on the porch had compelled him to stop. "Excuse me, ma'am," he said respectfully, removing his baseball cap. "I don't mean to intrude, but I couldn't help but notice that flag. Did your husband serve?" Sarah looked up at the famous NFL player standing at her gate, surprised by his presence, but more surprised by the genuine respect and concern in his voice. "Yes, sir, he did. Staff Sergeant Michael Caldwell. He was killed in action 6 months ago." Travis felt his chest tighten. "I'm sorry for your loss, ma'am. Your husband was a hero." "Thank you," Sarah replied, her voice barely above a whisper. "Though I'm not sure what good being a hero does when your own country abandons your family afterward." The bitterness in her words caught Travis off guard. He glanced at the foreclosure notice in her other hand, then back at her face. "Ma'am, if you don't mind me asking, what's going on?" Sarah laughed, but it was a sound devoid of any humor. "What's going on? My husband dies protecting freedom overseas, and I'm losing our home because his death benefits are tied up in bureaucratic red tape. The bank won't wait, and apparently neither will the people who are supposed to help military families." She stood up from the rocking chair, still clutching both the flag and the foreclosure notice. "But you know what the worst part is?" Travis shook his head, sensing that whatever she was about to tell him would be important. Sarah looked directly into his eyes, her voice dropping to an urgent whisper that carried the weight of a devastating secret. "The worst part isn't losing the house. It's discovering that the benefits meant for my husband's sacrifice are being stolen by someone inside the very government he died serving. They didn't just kill my husband once overseas. They're killing him again right here at home." Travis Kelce stood frozen at the gate, the implications of what she had just said hitting him like a freight train. His mouth opened slightly, but no words came out. Emma Grace continued playing with her toy soldiers in the dirt, completely unaware that her mother had just revealed information that could bring down powerful people and change everything. Travis felt the blood drain from his face as he processed Sarah's words. "Ma'am, what do you mean the benefits are being stolen? Can you explain that?" Sarah glanced nervously at Emma Grace, then motioned for Travis to come through the gate. "Come sit on the porch. This isn't something I should be saying out loud on the street." Her hands were shaking as she settled back into the rocking chair, and Travis took a seat on the porch steps, turning to face her. "The man who's foreclosing on our house is Buck Wellington," Sarah began, her voice barely steady. "He owns Wellington property, and he's been trying to buy up houses in this neighborhood for months. But here's the thing. Buck also works part-time for the Department of Veterans Affairs downtown. He has access to all the benefit files, all the paperwork, all the processing timeline." Travis leaned forward, his full attention focused on every word. "You think he's using inside information to target military families? I think he's doing worse than that, Sarah replied, pulling a manila folder from beside her chair. I think he's actively delaying benefit payment and then swooping in to buy the houses cheap and families can't make their mortgage. Look at this. She opened the folder and spread several documents across the small table between them. These are all houses, a 3-block radius, that have been foreclosed in the past year. Every single one belonged to a military family. Every single one was bought by Wellington Properties for 20 to 30% below market value. And every single family had their benefits delayed for months before losing their home. Travis studied the documents, his anger building with each page. This can't be legal. There have to be oversight systems in place to prevent this kind of corruption. That's what I thought too, Sarah said bitterly. So I filed complaints with the VA, with the State Attorney General's office, with my congressman's office. Want to know what happened? Nothing. My complaints disappeared into the system and my benefit payments got delayed even longer. How long have your benefits been delayed? Travis asked. 7 months. Mike died in April and I haven't received a single dollar of his death benefit, his pension, or his life insurance payout. Buck Wellington knows exactly how much money is supposed to be coming to me, and he knows exactly when it's not coming. He's been pressuring me to sell the house to him directly the past 2 months. Travis stood up and began pacing on the small porch, his mind racing. Sarah, this is massive. If what you're saying is true, this isn't just about your house. This could be affecting dozens, maybe hundreds of military families. I know, Sarah said quietly. And I think Buck knows that I know. 2 weeks ago, I hired a lawyer with the last of our savings to investigate the delays. Yesterday, that lawyer called and said he was dropping my case due to conflicts of interest. Today, I get this foreclosure notice with a 48-hour deadline. Emma Grace looked up from her toys and ran over to the porch. Mommy, who's this man? Is he here to help us move? Sarah's composure finally cracked, and tears began streaming down her face. No, baby. He's not here about moving. Why don't you go inside and get yourself a snack? After Emma Grace went into the house, Sarah turned to Travis with desperation in her eyes. Mr. Kelce, I recognize you from television, and I know you have resources that normal people like me don't have. I'm not asking you to save us, but I'm asking you to help me expose what's happening here before Buck destroys more family. Travis pulled out his phone without hesitation. Sarah, I'm going to make some calls right now. First, I'm going to pay off your mortgage to buy us time. Second, I'm going to hire the best private investigators in the state to look into Buck Wellington and anyone else involved in this scheme. You can't just pay off our mortgage, Sarah protested. That's not why I told you that. Yes, I can. And yes, I am, Travis replied firmly. Mike died serving our country, and no family should lose their home while grieving a hero. But more importantly, if Buck Wellington is stealing from military families, we're going to make sure he never steals from anyone again. Travis spent the next hour making phone calls while Sarah provided every document and piece of evidence she had collected. By evening, he had transferred enough money to bring her mortgage current and had hired Reynolds Investigation Services, the most respected private investigation firm in Kansas. They'll start working tomorrow, Travis told her as he prepared to leave. Within a week, we'll know exactly what Buck Wellington is up to and who else is involved. Sarah walked him to his car, clutching the folded flag to her chest. Mr. Kelce, I can't thank you enough. For the first time in months, I feel like maybe there's hope. There's always hope, Sarah. Your husband fought for justice overseas, and now we're going to fight for justice right here at home. For 2 weeks, life felt almost normal again. Sarah was able to focus on helping Emma Grace with homework instead of worrying about losing her home. The private investigators were discreet and professional, gathering evidence without alerting Buck Wellington to their activity. But on a Thursday morning in late November, everything changed. Sarah was having coffee on the porch when a sheriff's deputy pulled into her driveway. He approached the house carrying an official-looking envelope and a clipboard. Mrs. Caldwell, I have legal documents for you. Sarah's hands trembled as she opened the envelope. Inside was a new foreclosure notice, but this one was different. This one cited an obscure state law about property liens and gave her 72 hours to vacate the premises immediately. I don't understand, Sarah said to the deputy. Mr. Kelce paid off the entire mortgage. How can they foreclose on a house that's paid in full? The deputy shrugged sympathetically. Ma'am, I just deliver the paper. You'll need to talk to a lawyer about the details. As the deputy drove away, Sarah called Travis immediately. They're trying to take the house again. Buck found some kind of legal loophole, and now I have 3 days to get out. Travis's voice was tight with anger when he responded. He knows we're investigating him. This is his way of getting you out before we can expose what he's doing. What are we going to do? Sarah asked, panic creeping into her voice. We're going to fight back harder, Travis replied. I'm driving over there right now. But when Travis arrived an hour later, Sarah had more devastating news waiting for him. The private investigators had called with their preliminary finding, and the scope of Buck Wellington's operation was far worse than either of them had imagined. Travis sat in Sarah's living room as she read from the investigators' report, her voice shaking with each revelation. Buck Wellington isn't working alone. The investigation found evidence of a network involving at least 6 people in the VA office, 2 bank officials, and someone in the county courthouse who processes foreclosure documents. How many families are affected? Travis asked, dreading the answer. At least 50 military families in this county alone, going back 3 years. The investigators estimate that over $2 million in death benefits, disability payments, and pension funds have been diverted or delayed. Sarah set the report down and looked at Travis with fire in her eyes. They've been stealing from the families of dead soldiers for 3 years. Travis felt sick to his stomach. What's their system? How are they pulling this off? Sarah flipped to another page in the report. Buck uses his position at the VA to identify families with large benefit payouts coming. He delays the paperwork processing, then his banking contacts make sure those families can't get emergency loans to cover their mortgages. When the houses go into foreclosure, Buck's company buys them at sheriff's auctions for pennies on the dollar. And the families? Most of them leave town completely. They can't afford to fight the system, so they just disappear. Start over somewhere else if they can. Sarah's voice broke. Travis, these people served our country, and our own government is destroying their family for profit. Travis stood up and walked to the window overlooking Emma Grace's play area. We have evidence now. We can take this to the FBI, to the media, to anyone who will listen. That's what I thought too, Sarah said sadly. But there's more bad news. She handed him another document from the investigator's file. Buck found out about the investigation 2 days ago. The investigators think someone tipped him off. Possibly someone in law enforcement or the legal system. Travis scanned the document, his anger building with each paragraph. He's accelerating his timeline. The foreclosure notice you got today is just the beginning. What do you mean? According to this, Buck has already filed paperwork to foreclose on 12 other military families in the county. All of them will get eviction notices within the next week. Travis turned back to Sarah. He's trying to clear out all the evidence before anyone can stop him. Sarah sank into her chair, overwhelmed by the scope of the corruption they were facing. How do we fight something this big? They have people inside every system that's supposed to protect us. Before Travis could answer, there was a knock at the front door. Sarah looked through the window and smiled with relief. It's Betty May from next door. She's been like a grandmother to Emma Grace since Mike died. Betty May Hendrick was a 74-year-old widow who had served as an army nurse in Vietnam. She had been watching the investigation unfold from her kitchen window and had been quietly gathering information of her own. "Sarah, honey, I need to talk to you and Mr. Kelce," Betty May said, as she settled into a chair with a thick manila envelope. "I've been keeping records on Buck Wellington for 2 years, ever since he started sniffing around this neighborhood." Beedert, she opened the envelope, spread out dozens of photographs, documents, and handwritten notes. "I used to work in military administration, so I know what proper paperwork looks like. Buck has been coming to my house pretending to do property assessments, but I caught him taking photos of private documents in my kitchen." Travis examined the photographs Betty May had taken through her window. "These show Buck going through your personal papers, not just mine. He's been in 6 different houses on this street doing the same thing. I documented every visit, every document he photographed, every conversation he had with the family." Betty May pointed to a series of photos showing Buck at different houses. "This man has been systematically gathering intelligence on every military family in the neighborhood." Sarah stared at the evidence spread across her coffee table. "Betty May, this proves he's been planning this for years. Why didn't you say something sooner?" "Honey, I tried. I called the police. I called the VA office. I even called my congressman's office. But Buck Wellington knows a lot of important people in this town. Every time I filed a complaint, it disappeared. And Buck would show up at my door the next day, asking if I had any concerns about neighborhood security. Travis felt a chill run down his spine. He's been intimidating you? Not directly, but the message was clear. Keep quiet or face the consequences. Betty May gathered up her documents, but when I saw you helping Sarah, I knew it was time to take a stand. These families deserve justice. They spent the next 2 hours going through Betty May's evidence, building a comprehensive picture of Buck Wellington's operation. By late afternoon, they had enough documentation to file criminal charges against multiple people. I'm going to drive this evidence to the FBI field office in Kansas City tonight, Travis announced. We can't trust anyone local with this information. Sarah felt hope returning for the first time in days. Do you think they'll be able to stop the foreclosures? I think with Betty May's evidence combined with the private investigator's finding, we can blow this whole scheme wide open, Travis replied. Buck Wellington picked the wrong families to mess with. Betty May stood up to leave, gathering her papers carefully. I'll be happy to testify against Buck and anyone else involved. These families have sacrificed enough. But as she reached for the front door, Betty May suddenly stumbled and fell backward down the porch steps. Sarah screamed and rushed to help her, but Betty May was unconscious and bleeding from a head wound. "Call 911!" Travis shouted, kneeling beside the elderly woman and checking for a pulse. She hit her head hard on the concrete. The ambulance arrived within minutes and rushed Betty May to the hospital. As Travis and Sarah followed in his car, Sarah noticed something that made her blood run cold. Travis, Betty May's envelope is gone. All her evidence, all her photographs, everything she brought over to show us. It's not in the house anymore. Travis checked his rearview mirror and saw a familiar vehicle following them at a distance. Sarah, I think Betty May's fall wasn't an accident. At the hospital, doctors confirmed that Betty May had suffered a severe concussion and would be unconscious for at least 48 hours. Even if she woke up, there was no guarantee she would remember the events leading up to her fall. As they sat in the hospital waiting room, Sarah's phone rang. It was Reverend Thomas Whitfield, the chaplain who had delivered the news of Mike's death. "Sarah, I need to see you immediately. I have some very difficult news about your situation with Buck Wellington." An hour later, Reverend Whitfield sat across from Sarah and Travis in the hospital cafeteria, his face grave with concern. "I've spent the day making calls about your case, Sarah. I'm afraid the situation is worse than we thought." "What do you mean?" Sarah asked. "Buck Wellington got to the judge who was handling your foreclosure case. Judge Harrison has been bought off. The 72-hour eviction notice stands, and there's no legal recourse available. You'll be forced out of your home tomorrow morning." Sarah felt the world spinning around her. "But we have evidence of corruption. We have Betty May's testimony." "Betty May can't testify now, and even if she could, Buck has convinced Judge Harrison that all the evidence was obtained illegally." Reverend Whitfield reached across the table and took Sarah's hand. "I'm sorry, but you need to start packing tonight. There's nothing more anyone can do legally." Travis slammed his fist on the table, causing other diners to look in their direction. This is exactly what Buck wanted. He eliminated Betty May as a witness and bought off the judge. He's going to get away with everything. Sarah sat, stunned silent, clutching Mike's flag to her chest. After months of fighting, after all of Travis's help, after all the evidence they had gathered, she was still going to lose her home. From her hospital bed, Betty May stared out the window toward Maple Street, furious that she couldn't help the family that needed her most. Travis found Sarah the next morning sitting on her porch at dawn, surrounded by cardboard boxes and suitcases. Emma Grace was still sleeping inside, unaware that this would be their last morning in the only home she had ever known. "I couldn't sleep," Sarah said quietly. As Travis sat down beside her on the steps, "I kept thinking about Mike, about how he believed this country stood for justice and doing what's right. I wonder what he would think if he could see what's happening to his family now." Travis noticed that Sarah was still holding the folded flag, but now she also had a small wooden box in her lap. "What's in the box?" he asked gently. "Mike's medal," Sarah replied, opening it to reveal a purple heart, a bronze star, and several service ribbons. "I thought maybe if I showed them to the sheriff when he comes to evict us, he might remember that my husband died for this country. Maybe he'll give us more time." The pain in her voice was unbearable. Travis stood up abruptly. "Sarah, I'm going to the hospital to check on Betty May. Maybe she's awake and can remember something that will help us." At Leavenworth General Hospital, Travis found Betty May conscious but groggy, with a large bandage wrapped around her head. When she saw him, her eyes immediately sharpened with urgency. Mr. Kelce, thank goodness you're here. I remember everything about yesterday, and I remember something else I didn't tell you before. Betty May struggled to sit up in her hospital bed. Buck Wellington didn't just steal my evidence envelope. For the past 2 years, I've been making copies of everything and hiding them in my house. Travis leaned closer. What kind of copy? Photographs, documents, recording. I have a voice recorder that I've been using to document every conversation Buck has had with families in the neighborhood. It's all hidden in my basement, in a trunk behind the furnace. Betty May, can you give me permission to go into your house and get those copies? More than that, Betty May said, reaching into her bedside table drawer. I can give you the key and tell you exactly where to find everything, but you need to hurry. If Buck realizes I survived the fall and might remember what happened, he'll try to destroy any evidence in my house. Travis took the key and detailed instructions from Betty May, then rushed back to Maple. He parked in Betty May's driveway and went directly to her basement, following her directions to a large trunk hidden behind the water heater. Inside the trunk, he found a treasure trove of evidence that was even more damning than what Betty May had shown them the day before. Photographs of Buck forging documents, audio recordings of him threatening families, and most importantly, copies of internal VA memos showing the systematic delay of benefit payments. But as Travis was loading the evidence into boxes, he heard footsteps on the basement stairs. He looked up to see Buck Wellington standing at the bottom of the steps, flanked by 2 large men in dark suits. Mr. Kelce, you're trespassing on private property, Buck said with a cold smile. I'm afraid I'm going to have to ask you to leave immediately and turn over any items you may have taken from this house. Travis stood up slowly, keeping the boxes of evidence behind him. Actually, Buck, I have permission from the homeowner to be here. Betty May gave me her key and specifically asked me to retrieve these items. Betty May Hendricks suffered a severe head injury yesterday. She's not legally competent to give anyone permission for anything. Buck stepped closer, his companions moving to block the basement exit. Those documents belong to me now, as Betty May's appointed legal guardian. Since when are you Betty May's legal guardian? Travis demanded. Buck pulled out an official-looking document. Since this morning, when Judge Harrison signed the emergency guardianship paper, Betty May is elderly, confused, and clearly unable to make rational decisions about her own safety or property. Travis realized he was trapped. Buck had outmaneuvered them again, using his connections in the legal system to gain control over Betty May's property and evidence. You can't do this, Travis said. This is evidence of criminal activity. What I see, Buck replied, is a famous athlete breaking into an elderly woman's home and stealing her personal belongings. I think the police would be very interested in hearing about this. One of Buck's companions stepped forward. Mr. Kelce, you have 2 choices. You can leave now and forget everything you think you've discovered, or we can call the sheriff and have you arrested for breaking and entering. Travis looked at the boxes of evidence, knowing they represented the only hope for justice for Sarah and dozens of other military families. But he also knew that if he was arrested, he couldn't help anyone. I'll leave, Travis said finally. But this isn't over. Oh, but it is, Buck replied with satisfaction. Sarah Caldwell will be evicted in 2 hours. Betty May Hendricks is now under my legal guardianship, and you're going to walk away and never interfere in my business again. Travis drove back to Sarah's house feeling defeated for the first time in his life. He found her loading the last of their belongings into a rented moving truck, with Emma Grace helping by carrying her stuffed animals. Any luck with Betty May? Sarah asked hopefully. Travis shook his head. Buck got to her too. He's been appointed as her legal guardian, which means he controls all her property and can prevent her from testifying. Sarah sat down heavily on the truck's loading ramp. So that's it. We've lost everything, and Buck Wellington gets away with stealing from military families. Mommy, Emma Grace said, tugging on Sarah's sleeve. Where are we going to live now? Sarah picked up her daughter and held her close, fighting back tears. I don't know, sweetheart, but we'll figure it out together. Travis watched this scene and felt something ignite inside him. He pulled out his phone and scrolled through his contacts until he found the number he was looking for. Who are you calling? Sarah asked. Someone who can help us fight back, Travis replied as the phone began ringing. Mary Lou Fitzgerald is an investigative journalist for CNN. She specializes in exposing government corruption. When Mary Lou answered, Travis didn't waste time with pleasantries. Mary Lou, It's Travis Kelce. I have a story that will blow up the internet and take down some very corrupt people. But I need your help to protect a military family while we expose the truth. What kind of story? Mary Lou asked, her professional interest immediately engaged. The kind that involves stealing millions of dollars from the families of dead soldiers, Travis replied, looking directly at Sarah. And I have evidence that goes all the way to the top. Sarah felt a spark of hope return as she watched Travis talk to the journalist. Maybe their fight wasn't over after all. How soon can you get to Kansas? Travis asked Mary Lou. I can be there tonight, she replied. This better be as big as you're making it sound. Travis looked at Buck Wellington's car, pulling up to the house with the sheriff's deputy behind it. Trust me, it's bigger than you can imagine. Mary Lou Fitzgerald arrived in Leavenworth at 10 o'clock that evening, driving a rented sedan and carrying 2 laptops, 3 digital cameras, and a determination to uncover the truth that had made her one of the most feared investigative journalists in the country. Travis met her at Sarah's hotel room, where they had relocated after the eviction. Show me everything, Mary Lou said without preamble, setting up her equipment on the small hotel table. For the next 3 hours, Travis and Sarah laid out the entire case. The delayed benefits, the pattern of foreclosures, Buck Wellington's dual role at the VA, and as a property investor, Betty May's evidence, and the corruption of local officials. Mary Lou worked methodically, taking notes, recording interviews, and making phone calls to sources across the country. This isn't just a local corruption story, she said finally. If what you're telling me is accurate, this could be happening in military communities nationwide. What do you mean? Sarah asked. I mean, Buck Wellington's system is too sophisticated to be a one-off operation. Someone taught him how to manipulate VA paperwork, how to coordinate with banking officials, how to corrupt local judges. This has the hallmarks of an organized network. Mary Lou pulled up several news articles on her laptop. I've been tracking similar stories in North Carolina, Texas, and Virginia over the past 2 years. Military families losing their homes due to administrative delays in benefit payments, followed by rapid property acquisitions by local investment companies. Travis felt his anger building as he read the headline. You're saying this is happening all over the country? I'm saying Buck Wellington might be part of a much larger conspiracy to defraud military families. And if that's true, we're not just talking about local corruption. We're talking about a federal crime involving millions of dollars and potentially hundreds of families. Sarah sank into a chair, overwhelmed by the scope of what they were uncovering. How do we prove something that big? Very carefully, Mary Lou replied, and with help from people inside the system who are tired of watching this happen. She pulled out her phone and made a call. Jim, it's Mary Lou Fitzgerald. I need to speak with Agent Sarah Chen at the FBI Financial Crimes Division. Tell her it's about systematic fraud targeting military family. While Mary Lou set up interviews with federal investigators, Travis faced a difficult decision. Buck Wellington had made it clear that continued interference would result in retaliation, not just against Travis, but against Sarah and Emma Grace. Mary Lou, how long will this investigation take? Travis asked. Sarah and Emma Grace are living in a hotel room with no income and no home. Buck Wellington is still out there targeting other families. Federal investigations move slowly, Mary Lou admitted. Even with solid evidence, it could take months to build a case that will stick. And if Buck Wellington has connections inside the system, he might be warned before agents can move against him. Sarah had been listening quiet, but now she spoke up with steel in her voice. Then we don't wait for the federal investigation. We expose him publicly first and force the government to act. That's dangerous, Mary Lou warned. Going public before we have ironclad proof gives Buck a chance to destroy evidence and disappear. It also puts you at risk of a defamation lawsuit. I'm already at risk, Sarah replied. I've lost my home, my income, and my sense of security. Emma Grace asks me every day when we're going home, and I don't have an answer. If Buck Wellington is destroying other military families while we wait for perfect evidence, then we have to act now. Travis admired Sarah's courage, but he also understood the stake. Sarah, if we go public and can't prove everything we're alleging, Buck will sue us into oblivion and continue his operation somewhere else. And if we don't go public, how many more families will lose everything while we're building the perfect case? Sarah stood up and walked to the window overlooking the hotel parking lot. Mike didn't wait for perfect conditions before he served his country. He did what was right when it needed to be done. Mary Lou closed her laptop, and looked at both of them seriously. If we're going to do this, we need to do it right. Full documentation, multiple sources, and enough evidence to make Buck Wellington's denials impossible to believe. "What do you need from us?" Travis asked. "I need Sarah to go on camera and tell her story in detail. I need documentation of every delay, every contact with VA official, every interaction with Buck Wellington, and I need access to other families who have been affected by this scheme." Sarah nodded immediately. "I can contact other military wives in the area. Word travels fast in military communities, and I know several families who have had similar problems." "What about Betty May?" Travis asked. "She has the most damning evidence, but Buck has legal guardianship over her." Mary Lou smiled for the first time since arriving. "Legal guardianship doesn't prevent someone from talking to journalists, especially if they're competent and willing to speak. We just need to be smart about how we approach." They spent the rest of the night planning their approach. Mary Lou would interview Sarah and other affected families, while Travis would work on gathering additional financial evidence. They would visit Betty May in the hospital the next day and try to get her testimony on camera. But when they arrived at Leavenworth General Hospital the following morning, they discovered that Betty May Hendrick had been discharged during the night and transferred to a private nursing facility an hour away. "Transferred by whom?" Mary Lou asked the nurse at the information desk. "By her legal guardian, Mr. Wellington. He felt she would receive better care at a specialized facility." Travis felt his heart sink. "Buck moved her to isolate her from us? Maybe," Mary Lou said thoughtfully. "Or maybe he just made his first major mistake. Private nursing facilities have to follow federal regulations about patient rights and visitor access. Betty May might be more accessible there than she was here." As they left the hospital, Sarah's phone rang. It was Emma Grace calling from the hotel where she was staying with a babysitter Travis had arranged. "Mommy, there's a man here who says he wants to talk to you about Daddy's benefits," Emma Grace said innocently. Sarah felt ice run through her veins. "Sweetheart, what man? Is he wearing a uniform?" "No, he's wearing a suit. He says his name is Mr. Wellington and that he can help us get our house back." Sarah looked at Travis and Mary Lou with panic in her eyes. "Buck Wellington is at the hotel with my daughter." Travis was already running toward his car. "We're on our way, Emma Grace. Don't open the door for anyone, and stay on the phone with your mother." As they raced across town, Mary Lou was already calling the police, but they all knew that by the time law enforcement arrived, Buck Wellington would have accomplished whatever he had come to do. The game had just become much more dangerous, and an 8-year-old girl was now in the middle of it. Travis's car screeched into the hotel parking lot just as Buck Wellington was walking out of the main entrance, adjusting his tie with the satisfied expression of a man who had accomplished his mission. Mary Lou immediately began filming with her phone as Travis confronted him in the parking lot. "What did you say to that little girl?" Travis demanded, blocking Buck's path to his vehicle. Buck smiled coldly. "I simply explained to young Emma Grace that her mother has been telling lies about me, and that continued lies could result in very serious consequences for their family." "You threatened an 8-year-old child?" Mary Lou said from behind her camera, making sure to capture every word. "I educated a child about the importance of honesty," Buck replied, noticing the camera for the first time. "Ms. Fitzgerald, I presume. I've heard about your reputation for sensationalizing local business disputes." Mary Lou kept filming. "Mr. Welling, are you denying that you've used your position at the VA to delay benefit payments to military families and then purchased their homes through foreclosure proceedings?" Buck's smile never wavered. "I'm stating that I'm a legitimate businessman who provides valuable services to this community. Any allegations to the contrary are the desperate fantasies of people who refuse to take responsibility for their own financial problem." Travis stepped closer. "We have evidence, Buck. We have documentation of your entire operation. Evidence that was obtained through criminal trespassing and theft," Buck replied. "Evidence that would be inadmissible in any court of law, assuming you were foolish enough to pursue legal action." But, as Buck spoke, he made a crucial error. In his confidence, he revealed information that only someone with inside knowledge of the VA system would know. "Besides," Buck continued, "Mrs. Caldwell's benefit delay was caused by incomplete paperwork filed by her husband before his deployment. Staff Sergeant Caldwell failed to properly designate his beneficiary information, which resulted in the automatic 30-day review process being extended to 90 days. Mary Lou's eyes sharpened behind her camera. "Mr. Wellington, How would you know the specific details of Staff Sergeant Caldwell's paperwork filing? That information would only be available to VA employees with access to confidential military records. Buck's face went pale as he realized his mistake. He had just admitted on camera to having knowledge that no legitimate property investor should possess. That information was provided to me during the standard foreclosure proceeding, Buck stammered, his earlier confidence evaporating. Foreclosure proceedings don't include details about military deployment paperwork or VA beneficiary designations, Mary Lou pressed, still filming. You just demonstrated intimate knowledge of classified military records. How did you obtain that information? Buck looked around the parking lot, realizing that he was trapped. Several hotel guests had stopped to watch the confrontation, and Mary Lou's camera was capturing everything. This conversation is over, Buck said, pushing past Travis toward his car. Any further harassment will result in legal action against all of you. As Buck drove away, Travis and Mary Lou rushed inside to check on Sarah and Emma Grace. They found them in their hotel room, with Emma Grace visibly shaken but unharmed. He told me that Mommy was lying about him, and that lying could get us in big trouble, Emma Grace said, clinging to Sarah. He said sometimes little girls have to go live with other families when their mommies can't take care of them properly. Sarah held her daughter close, fury radiating from every muscle in her body. He threatened to have Emma Grace taken away from me. Mary Lou was already on her phone with her editor at CNN. We're going live tonight. Buck Wellington just made threats against a child on camera and admitted to having access to classified military records. This story breaks in 6 hours. While Mary Lou coordinated with her news team, Travis made his own series of phone calls. Within 2 hours, he had assembled a coalition that included 3 other NFL players, 2 country music stars, and a dozen social media influencers, all of whom had military connections and were ready to amplify the story. Buck Wellington thinks he can intimidate a Gold Star family, Travis said, during a conference call with his celebrity contact. Let's show him what happens when America finds out how military families are being treated. Mary Lou's investigation had also yielded additional evidence. Her contacts at the FBI had confirmed that similar schemes were operating in at least 6 other states, all following the same pattern of VA employees collaborating with local property investors to defraud military families. This isn't just about Buck Wellington anymore, Mary Lou told Sarah as they prepared for the evening broadcast. You're about to become the face of a national scandal that could reach all the way to Washington. At 8 o'clock that evening, CNN interrupted its regular programming with a special report titled Betraying Our Heroes, How Military Families Are Being Robbed at Home. Mary Lou's investigation was thorough, devastating, and undeniable. The broadcast included Sarah's full interview, audio recordings of Buck threatening families, documentation of the foreclosure patterns, and most damaging of all, Buck's parking lot confession about having access to classified military records. Within minutes of the broadcast ending, social media exploded with outrage. Justice for Sarah began trending nationwide, with millions of Americans expressing fury at the treatment of military families. But the real impact came the next morning. Travis woke up to dozens of missed calls from military families across the country, all reporting similar experiences with delayed benefits and suspicious foreclosure. Travis, we need to set up a hotline, Mary Lou said when she called at dawn. My phone hasn't stopped ringing. This is bigger than we imagined. By noon, the FBI had arrested Buck Wellington at his office, along with 4 other VA employees and 2 bank officials. Federal agents had seized computers, files, and financial records that documented a fraud scheme involving over $8 million stolen from military families nationwide. Judge Harrison, the local judge who had been bought off, was also arrested and charged with corruption and obstruction of justice. But perhaps most importantly, Betty Mae Hendricks was released from the nursing facility where Buck had placed her, and she was able to provide additional testimony that helped federal investigators trace the full scope of the criminal network. 3 months later, Sarah Beth Caldwell stood on the steps of the U.S. Capitol building holding Emma Grace's hand as she addressed a joint session of Congress about the need for stronger protections for military families. My husband, Staff Sergeant Michael Caldwell, died believing that America would take care of his family, Sarah said, her voice carrying across the packed chamber. For a while, We discovered that some people were more interested in taking advantage of military families than taking care of them. But we also discovered that when good people learn about injustice, they don't just stand by and watch. The Military Family Protection Act, inspired by Sarah's story and drafted with input from dozens of affected families, passed both houses of Congress unanimously and was signed into law by the president 6 weeks later. Sarah and Emma Grace were able to move back into their home on Maple Street, which had been fully restored and paid for through a fund established by Travis and donated to by Americans from all 50 states. Buck Wellington was sentenced to 15 years in federal prison. The other members of his network received sentences ranging from 5 to 12 years. All stolen funds were recovered and returned to the affected families with interest. A year after the CNN broadcast, Travis visited Sarah and Emma Grace on a warm spring afternoon. They were sitting on the same porch where they had first met, but everything about their circumstance had changed. "Any regrets?" Travis asked as they watched Emma Grace play in the yard. Sarah looked at the folded flag that now sat in a place of honor on a special shelf, visible through the front window, next to Mike's medals and a framed photo of him in uniform. "Mike always said that the real enemy wasn't on some distant battlefield," Sarah replied. "He said the real enemy was people who would betray the trust of those who serve. He also said that the most important battles are fought by ordinary people who refuse to accept injustice." She smiled as Emma Grace ran over to show them a drawing she had made of her father in his military uniform. "I think Mike would be proud that we didn't just fight for our own family, but for all the families who came after us. The greatest honor we can give to those who serve is to make sure their sacrifice means something lasting." Travis nodded, watching Emma Grace carefully color in the American flag on her drawing. "Your father was a hero overseas, Emma Grace," he said gently, "and your mother is a hero right here at home. That's what makes America strong. Heroes taking care of heroes." Sarah looked out at her neighborhood, where several other military families had moved in over the past year, drawn by the community support and the knowledge that their service would be honored and protected. "Real patriotism," she said quietly, "isn't just about supporting our troops when they're fighting for freedom abroad. It's about making sure that freedom means something when they come home. It's about ensuring that the country they fought to protect actually protects them in return."